Welcome to the Jason de Sousa Show. Join us as we explore the evolving urban landscape, uncovering the trends, stories, and innovations shaping our cities. Thanks for watching and enjoy today's episode.
Dr. Shiva Rayar, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Jason.
Well, it's great to have you on. Now, look, I've got I suppose, somewhat of a conflict of interest to declare because you are my personal doctor.
I am.
I want to say thank you right now for looking after me and for the amazing care that you've given me over many, many years, and we share a lot of common interests. I will also say up front, I'm not giving you any blood today.
I'm not going to take any from you today at all. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for having me. And it actually has been a pleasure to look after you over the last 10 years as well.
I hope I've been a good patient. Right, so lots to talk about, but I guess, we talk a lot about many different things when we catch up, but one of the things I'm really interested in is, what got you into medicine?
Look, that is a really simple question, but it's actually quite a difficult one to answer.
It's always the way.
And it's actually, I remember when I was applying to get into medicine, it was one that was really quite difficult to come up with an answer for that didn't sound kind of...
Because you came from WA, right?
I came from WA. Yeah. And so I applied for universities around Australia, and it's a question that you have to answer that sort of differentiates you from everybody else, but we all kind of have very similar answers. So I think, how I would have answered that question 25 years ago versus how I would answer it now is very different. And I think it's a little bit more introspective now I'm a bit more introspective now about how I would answer that question. And it's not...
Does that come with age? Is that what it is?
I think so. And maybe age and becoming more boring, potentially. Look, if I really dig down deep as to why I chose medicine, I think it comes from a place where, when I was younger, I wasn't really sure, where I would fit in the world, whether the world had a spot for me. And I think pretty early on, I recognized that medicine was an area in which I could add value, and add value to people's lives. And if I was able to add value, then I had a spot in the world. And I think if I really look back into why I went into medicine, that was the reason why I went into it.
Because you felt that was your spot in the world. That's where you could create value.
Correct.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. And have you felt that that's been the case? Because you've had a pretty broad interest spectrum. So I've seen a lot of medicos and doctors and have lots of them who are friends, but you've got very specific interests, sort of sexual health, regional health, Indigenous health. You've kind of broken out and started looking at things beyond being a general practitioner.
Yeah.
Right? Is that where you're deriving the value from, do you think?
Look, I think I've worked in all of those areas out of curiosity. Indigenous health was, I didn't get much exposure to Indigenous people growing up in Australia.
Well, very few of us do, right? I mean, you and WA would be closer than many of us here in Sydney.
Yeah, absolutely. But not as in terms of individual interactions, very little. Refugee health was the same thing. I was curious to see who the people were who were coming into Australia as refugees and what their experience was like. And so I got to see them directly off a boat, effectively, and in detention centers. Yeah. So I got to meet them and put a face to who this group of people were. So Indigenous health, refugee health, these are people that most of us don't get exposure to. And it was really my curiosity towards the humanity that sent me towards it again, not so much the medicine itself.
That's interesting. The humanity aspect of medicine, I think, is fascinating, right? Because I think it's such a vexed discussion we're having now globally around migration, and you have two schools of thought. One is an economic question around the validity of borders and the economic security of a country and the rights and opportunities for the existing population versus global disruption, war, pandemics, all that sort of thing that leads to mass migration. And I find that those of my friendship group who are involved in the care of people have a particular view about humanity, and the others who are sort of involved in the more economic or business part of the world have a different view. It's pretty fascinating about that. But you have come back still to, despite exploring those sort of curiosities, you've really focused on your GP career overall. You work in a pretty cool medical practice that isn't just a standard suburban medical practice, Holdsworth House. It has quite a diversity of views as well around things. How do you find that type of practice?
Look, I really love working there. I've been there now for 9 years, and it has been a practice in which the environment is really beautiful for us to work in.
Yeah, it's a beautiful place.
Beautiful place, right? Like lovely art. There are actual windows in our rooms, which is great.
That's right.
So you get to see the sunlight. And the people who come to the practice also value the practice, and they value seeing us as practitioners. And so everyone who's there actually wants to be there. The people who work there and the patients as well. And I think that makes a really big difference in terms of career satisfaction. So the people I work with are also really great as well. And the medicine that we practice there is a little bit niche. So there's the general practice aspect of it, and then there's the sexual health, HIV medicine side of it. And that's given me a really nice balance between general medicine and then a subspecialty as well, which I've really been able to enjoy.
Yeah. I want to get into that because I'm quite fascinated by some of those issues. But just carrying on a little bit on the practice itself, do you find being a doctor, because as a doctor you're really an individual trader, is that right? I know my friends who are specialists are sort of individual businesses. And one of the things they talk to me about is how when you learn to be a doctor, you learn about the medical part of it, but not necessarily the business part of it. And so I hear these stories of specialists who, graduate to being a specialist and they say, oh, I now need referrals. How do I get referrals? Oh, I know I've got to talk to this doctor, that doctor, this doctor, and I'm going to buy them lunch. Okay, I'm going to buy them lunch. And as a doctor, this sort of commercial aspect seems like a bit of an anathema. Is that how you feel about things, or is it a bit different in GP practice?
I think the business aspect of it is just simply about how you relate to people and how you treat people. So if you're trying to build up your business as a general practitioner, it's about how you treat your patients, and they will come back to you if you treat them nicely. And likewise with other specialties, if I refer to an eye specialist, for example, and my patient is happy with the care with the specialist, then I will continue to refer back to them as well. And how the specialist communicates with me in terms of being collaborative in our care for the patient makes a difference too. So it's really just about how you treat your colleagues and how you treat your patients, and it's a service industry at the end of the day.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm an advisor, I'm a corporate advisor, that's the same with us, right? It's entirely a service industry. I do think what's interesting with the specialist thing is how well they communicate back with the GP is important to me. So you've been my doctor for a long period of time. When you've referred me to a specialist, I tend to go back to you and say, hey, what has this guy or lady said? Is this, is this legit? Is it not? Not legit, but is it? Explain this to me in a layman's way. Right? I think that to me is the most important part of medicine, right? Because as a patient, I don't know anything about what you know about. I'm really needing to trust an advisor on how to manage my body and all that sort of stuff. And increasingly now my children, I have to ask their doctor, who is their mother's doctor, exactly what, there's nothing wrong with them, but, on sort of, on that sort of, actually you have treated my little one. You treated my middle child, Emma, when that's how we met, actually, I think. So when she cut her finger and had to have microsurgery. That was back in the day.
Was that what I saw her for? Yeah, I can't remember that.
Yeah, she slammed she got her finger slammed in a door.
Right.
And then she had to go to hospital. After seeing you, she had to go to hospital and she had to have microsurgery on a nail bed. I didn't even know that was a thing.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's go to sexual health, right? So I would say sex is a pretty taboo subject, right? So, everybody probably talks about it every day in some way or the other.
Yeah.
Pretty taboo. There is a interesting social change that I think that's going on in sex, particularly with younger people, how they relate to one another. You've got a whole social media class happening. What do you experience as somebody who is practicing sexual health care? I mean, so I'm interested first in what you're seeing, and then I sort of want to go into some of the social issues that you might be seeing.
Yeah. Look, sexual health medicine is what I really actually love in medicine, mainly because it's a really interesting field. It's also one in which you can have a huge amount of impact very quickly in medicine. And it's also something that most people feel, as you said, very uncomfortable talking about. And so to be able to create a space in which people can come and say anything about their fears, about their concerns, anything that they have, any sort of sex that they've had, that they're a bit nervous about and they feel uncomfortable talking about, to be able to create that space for someone where they can really put it all on the table and you can really help them and consider every aspect of it, it's kind of like magic. So I'd say being in that space of medicine is really rewarding, and you can have almost immediate, you can have an immediate impact on the patient in that consult itself. So your question is more along the lines of what I see happening?
What are you seeing at the moment in your practice? So I presume when somebody comes to you for I'm guessing here, right, but for a consult in this space, something has happened to them, right? They might feel that they've had an incident, or they might feel like they've had something that has caused them to visit a doctor in relation to sexual health. Would that be right?
Yes. So the majority of the time when people come in to see me, whether it's general practice medicine or sexual health medicine, it is because there is this there's a sense of fear to some extent about something to do with their health, and there's a worry behind it. So if they're coming in for sexual health, usually they will come in for a sexual health test, or they'll have the question as to whether they need one, or they may need treatment for some symptoms that they have. And then they may also come in for sexual function issues as well.
Oh yes, of course.
So usually they have had a look online and they have some background knowledge, and they just need to, clarify a few points and get some perspective on it as well. So being able to give them, I guess, some perspective on that is helpful, essentially.
Are there sort of common things you're seeing in the practice?
Yeah, so we see a lot of STIs. So we see chlamydia, gonorrhea, syphilis. We see patients with HIV. And we look after them in terms of managing them over the long term, and also getting the virus under control as well.
But with the first group, like gonorrhea, the STD group. I sort of feel that when I was at school, STDs were a big deal, right? Everyone, the teachers talked about them. The risk of STD was a thing. Protected sex, you've got to have protected sex. It was the same. When I was growing up, it was around the time that HIV was just becoming known, right? Magic Johnson, the basketball player, was the first to be diagnosed with it. And I remember reading an article in the newspaper in Hong Kong which said Magic could live for 14 years, right? Of course, he's still alive and he's a multi-billionaire and he's fine, right? So now HIV doesn't seem to be the thing that it used to be. STDs don't seem to be something that really people talk about anymore. Why is that? Is it because they're not a problem anymore, or is it just we've just become accepted that we get these things?
So look, firstly, I'd like to clarify that they're now called STIs.
STIs, okay.
Yes. So the distinction is that it's called an infection as
not
opposed
a
to a disease.
I see, okay.
Right?
Well, there you go, I've learned something immediately.
Right? So I guess, it takes away a little bit of the negative connotation with disease, but also infections are generally treatable and manageable as well.
So something like a syphilis or gonorrhea or any of those things you mentioned, chlamydia, are treatable and they can go away.
Correct. Yeah, absolutely. Very easily, actually. So I think maybe you may not be moving in circles that are talking about STIs as much
Me, I think it's probably right. Yeah.
anymore, but they're certainly around.
Yeah.
And there's an increase in the number of STIs
Yeah.
that are being transmitted. So I think over the last 10 years, something like there's been a double in gonorrhea rates and tripling in syphilis rates in Australia. So we are seeing more STIs.
So we're seeing more of them, right?
more STIs.
So it's not so much that we're not talking about it, it's just I'm not hearing about it, is what you're telling me. Right? So what is causing the increase in STIs?
Look, at a very basic level, I'd say there's been a reduction in condom use.
Yeah.
So that would be a really simple explanation.
So that goes back to when I was at school, you must use a condom, don't get your partner pregnant, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, correct.
So despite the knowledge that condoms protect you, there's been a reduction in use.
Correct.
And is that because we're not fearful of STIs anymore? We can treat them, it's not a big deal?
I think so. So I think I think people are a bit more educated about STIs than they were before. They know that it's treatable, they go get tested regularly, they get treated afterwards as well. I think we probably have more partners than we used to, maybe 20, 30 years ago. And so I think that combination of factors has increased the number of STIs that we have.
I do agree with the number of partners thing, because I learned a new term the other day, body count.
Body count.
Yes.
Right.
So the idea, it's obviously another Americanism, but the concept basically of the number of partners you have is a question of body count, and therefore one of the questions a young person might ask another is, what is your body count?
Right.
Which, when I was dating somebody, I'm not quite sure I would quite be brave enough to ask that question, right? But and people are now deciding whether, well, you've had 35 partners, maybe maybe this isn't a good idea.
Yeah.
Is there a reduction in the way of thinking about when people decide to couple up or not couple up or have partners, or culturally, do you think that's a movement there around that?
Look, I'd say 35 is not actually that high a body count.
Well, there you go. Okay.
Right? So if you think about it,
I think it's extremely high, right?
So it depends on your age. If you're 18 and you've had 35 partners, that's probably a high body count.
Yeah.
But if you are 40 or 50, and you say you've been single for the majority of that time and you became sexually active at 18, so let's say that's 22 years. If you had sex with one person, a different person once a year, that would be 22 partners that you've had.
Yeah.
So if you've had 2 partners, then there's 44 new partners that you've had by the age of 40 if you've been single during that time. So it's not actually a huge number. It's quite easy to get up to 35.
When you put it like that, but then you're talking about somebody in their 40s. These are people who are in their 20s, right? So a bit of a different game, right?
Yes.
24 or 5, you've got 35 partners. I'm not saying, I don't know, but they might.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I find that really interesting, though, that the sort of fear of STIs with the rise of partners is not a thing. Or not less of a thing. Because I remember growing up and thinking, wow, this because it was an STD back then, right? So it was more serious than an STI.
Yeah.
That this was sort of a real concern, and I just wonder whether in the world of young people these days, it's sort of, it's another infection. It's like the cold. I'll treat it.
Yeah, I think sex and sexually transmitted infections have been destigmatized a lot over the last couple of decades.
Yeah.
And I think people are less fearful about getting an infection, mainly because there are people like me that they can go and see to get tested and then get treated, and they can just carry on with their lives. So I think
that's the point, isn't it? They can just carry on with their lives. It's not. HIV is a great example, right? HIV was magic could live for 14 years. It was a death sentence.
Yes.
It's not a death sentence. It's just a manageable infection.
Yes.
Is that a disease or an infection, HIV?
No, that's a good question. I'd say it is.
It's not curable, is it?
Yeah, it's not curable.
Yeah.
I don't know what the official definition would be, but I'd consider it an infection at this point, a chronic infection.
A chronic, so that's the word, isn't it? Chronic.
That's right. It's a chronic infection. It does have some repercussions, but for the large part, it is managed, if it's managed well, people can really live a life that is pretty much as long as somebody else who doesn't have HIV.
Yeah.
They have a few increased risk factors, But overall, they can, I have plenty of patients who've had HIV for a number of years and they live very normal, healthy lives.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They've just got to manage it in the right way.
Well, usually they either have to just take one tablet a day or get a couple of injections every 2 months. That's their treatment now.
What has changed in HIV medicine that has made it easy to manage? Is this retroviral drug, is that part of it?
Yeah, so it's one of the areas of medicine that is constantly developing and at a pretty rapid rate as well. Even in my time in HIV medicine, which has been about 12 years, or 12 to 13 years now, the changes that have happened in that time itself are remarkable. The main thing, I suppose, is that people generally just take one tablet a day to manage their HIV. And if they take that tablet every day, then their viral load is suppressed. And if they have sex with someone without a condom, they won't transmit it.
They won't transmit it?
If their viral load is undetectable.
Okay.
Which the majority of people generally are if they're well managed. And then if they take their antiretroviral every day and their viral load is suppressed, then the health repercussions are very, very low. So they need to have, checks for cancers and for heart disease and
which are secondary effects of the drugs.
Yeah, there's this theory that this sort of chronic inflammation from HIV can put them at an increased risk, and so we have to monitor for a few extra things. But overall, they're living life very normally. Yeah.
How often do you need to see a person with HIV? Do they come in once a month, once a year? What do they do?
I would see my patients every 4 to 6 months.
Every 4 to 6 months. So it's really not that much of an imposition in the end, really, is it? It's fascinating, the change, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because again, when I was at school, this was a death sentence.
Yeah,
right? And
absolutely.
But what is the incidence of HIV in Australia overall? Is it on the rise like other STIs?
So the incidence of the rate of HIV in Australia, new diagnoses are actually dropping.
Are dropping.
Yeah. So
isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
So STIs generally are up, but HIV is down.
Yeah. So at the moment there are around 700 new cases in Australia per year.
Per year. Okay. And that's, like, in the grand scheme of things, is not very high, or?
So in the world, I think the rates are around 1.3 million.
Okay.
Per year.
Yeah, interesting.
So it's a pretty small population of new diagnoses in Australia.
And Africa is still.
I wouldn't be able to tell you the numbers for Australia. Africa.
Because that was really at one point, Africa as a continent was really suffering from HIV.
Look, I think the rates are still very high there, and as they are in Asia as well, and in North America too. So.
And in North America.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah. I mean, I think predominantly it's in our developing countries, but it does impact people in North America too, to a large extent. Yeah.
But I mean, I presume in Africa and Asia, so we're an advanced economy with with a well-funded healthcare system. So the drugs are available.
Yes.
But I presume in Africa it's a bit of a different case.
Yeah.
So that means viral load is high, and therefore it spreads faster.
And I think it's different in each country in Africa as well. They have different governments and different levels of funding. Different
to manage these sorts of things.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's plenty of other things. Although it was interesting, I was reading an article saying that COVID in Africa and India was bad. It was bad everywhere, but it was a little bit better because their ability to handle viruses was better.
Right.
Which I found fascinating.
Yeah.
Because everything they're exposed to so much in developing countries already.
Yeah.
But, how true that is, I'm curious to see. But
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I do think that they probably developed some level of immunity fairly early on because of their high density populations, their lack of access to things like masks, perhaps.
Yeah.
So they probably all got COVID a lot faster than we did. They did, in fact, get a lot faster, and so
it spread through fast, and they got immune to it, or as immunity as they can be.
But there were a lot of deaths as well, a lot more deaths than we had in Australia. So
to be expected given the conditions.
Yeah.
I want to get to COVID in a second too, but just back on sexual health, because one of the areas I'm sort of interested in as well is sort of young people and how they are relating to sex, right? So one of the interesting things that I look at now is when we were growing up, and you're younger than me, but unfortunately there are people younger than you now, and so social media is a far bigger influence than when either of us were growing up, right? And you have a situation now where more and more young people are finding themselves in online environments that looking at material that is not realistic. So I think of online porn being a good example. More and more articles, more and more news, more and more journal articles about people learning about sex through porn, which is not a realistic environment by any means.
Yeah.
And then relating to one another after seeing that type of experience and being exposed to it a lot earlier in life than say we would have been. Because when I was growing up, it was not exactly easy to access that type of material. Right? It's certainly a lot easier now. And same I think the principle applies same for boys and girls, which is sort of learning how to relate to one another, or whatever sexuality you might be, learning to relate to one another. If you're learning that from online porn, I would say that sort of compromises the way you relate to one another. And then you take it further and you think of the dating app scene and sort of Tinder and hookup culture and all that sort of stuff. What are you seeing in your practice? Are you seeing do young people come and see you and talk to you about this stuff? Or is that not your patient group really?
It depends on what we define as young people.
Yeah.
I'd say
someone in their early 20s.
Yeah, I'd see people in their early 20s. I think there is a lot of anxiety around sex, mainly because of a worry about what people's sexual partners might expect of them.
Yeah, right. So that's really where I wanted to go, which is, so a young person comes to see you and they raise that issue, like what is expected of me in sex. That's fascinating. So what would how do they even raise that with you? I mean, I find it difficult to raise issues with you when I see you, right? And I'm an adult. Yeah. How does a young person do that?
Well, I think they'll indicate that they're having some difficulties with sex. And then it's sort of up to me to sort of ask.
Pry it out of them.
Yeah, that's right. So to ask relatively open-ended questions, and sometimes they're not open-ended, they are very direct. But it gives them an opportunity to answer the question if they want to. And then to try and explore perhaps where some of those issues have come from. So it takes a bit of finessing to sort of try and figure out exactly what the problem is. Whether it might be something like erectile dysfunction, it might be premature ejaculation, it might be just an inability to have sex even. So sort of, I guess.
Are you seeing incidents of that in younger men? Like all those issues? Really?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and it's almost always psychological.
It's always psychological?
Almost always, yeah. Wow. It's very rarely a medical issue.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's a level of anxiety or something that's driving that.
Yeah, and once you get into your head, it's hard to not worry about the next time you're going to have sex and whether you'll be able to perform, essentially.
The perform thing is, I think, really interesting, right? Because I mean, I certainly know as a boy, you are concerned about things like that, which is, how do I satisfy my partner? How do I make sure that they feel like this is a rewarding experience for them, blah, blah. That's a pretty common thing. I've learned recently that girls also have a similar fear of that. Although as a boy, you never really think of that, right? Do you see many girls in your practice, or is it mostly men that choose to come?
Mostly men that I see.
It's mostly, and that's because of your gender, I presume. Because they feel more comfortable with you. And girls talk to girls.
Yeah, and I think there's a relatability.
I should say women, not girls. I get in trouble for saying girls on a regular basis, right? But I always think it's a term of endearment rather than one of. But I think it's interesting. What do you think about how we teach sex these days? As a doctor, do you think we're not teaching it properly anymore? Do you think we are teaching it well, or are we just leaving it all to the online world to teach our kids?
I think it's really personal because each family feels differently about how much sex education their children should have. But I think it's really up to families to talk, parents to talk to their kids about sex and create an environment in which the child feels safe enough to ask questions and discuss it. And I know that for most parents, they, are mortified at the idea of their child having sex with anyone at any stage of life, really.
Absolutely correct.
Right? But I think parents need to sort of let go of that and remember what it was like for them when they were first going to have sex or having sex, and create an environment in which the kid feels like they can talk to them about it, and that sex isn't this, sinful, wrong thing to do. And it's hard. I'm sure it's really hard for parents to do that.
Oh, well, my group of friends, we tend to have daughters the same age, and in my case, I have a son. He's only 6, so it's too early for him. But for the girls, I mean, they're just, one of them's about to go into high school.
Yeah.
And the way we've dealt with it is just to be really, really honest about bodily function generally. Like, so, what will happen to your body as you hit puberty? It's these things. It's very normal. All women do this, right? Why do men and women get together? Well, and what is the impact of that? We will have that. We're having that conversation now. Interestingly, the younger one is also in on that conversation because we're talking to her older sister about it.
Right.
And I feel like that sort of just normalized the human process, or human relationship processes. Well, not relationship, but the physical aspect of it.
Yeah.
What is it? What does it mean? How does it all work? Why does it work? And I must say the school they're in is very good. They're in a girls' school, and I think that's very interesting because all those girls are going through it all together, and they're all girls, and they can kind of deal with that together, which I didn't anticipate. So I think you're right. I mean, certainly when we were growing up, it was taboo to talk about these things, really. And somehow we learnt about it, I suppose. But it is. I do feel parents are a bit more, at least in my circle of friends, as fathers, we've all ended up being involved in the discussion. Like in the olden days, no dad would talk about a period, for example.
Yes.
That's just not something a father would do.
Yes.
They don't exist.
Yeah.
Right. Now, well, why do they happen? So I do feel, I think you're right. I think parents are sort of getting more involved in that discussion.
Yeah, absolutely.
And hopefully that makes the children who are growing up feel a bit more comfortable in what is a very complex world for relationships between people. I mean, what I keep hearing from a lot of younger people I work with and see is how difficult it is to meet somebody these days. And we've covered that a lot on this podcast, which is, how do you actually go about finding, a partner that you want to be with these days? I mean, in my case, Marguerite took pity on me and married me, right? So I was lucky in that sense because, who knows what would have happened otherwise. But generally, you don't meet people at work anymore because, it's fraught with danger to do that. You don't really meet people in bars. People don't really go out so much anymore at cost of living and all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
I'm not sure the dating app is really a rewarding experience for many people. You hear all these stories about people, people having hundreds of dates and not, one of my, where you're a fellow South Asian, one of my South Asian friends was saying, well, there's something to be said for the old parental introduction via the South Asian family network, but that's certainly not common in broader things. I mean, how do you think people are meeting each other?
Look, people do find love on dating apps. I have seen it.
Yeah.
But
so have I. Yes.
But I think maybe the lost art of interacting with people, not necessarily for the purpose of meeting someone. I think if we interact with more people socially, and in a workplace, and in terms of hobbies, if we actually just connect with other human beings, we're going to increase our chances of meeting people.
I completely agree.
Right?
Yeah.
And I think that has reduced substantially. Maybe, COVID had some impact with that in terms of, how many people go out and socialize and go into work and go for after work activities. I think we don't socialize enough.
I agree completely. Have you seen the incidence of run clubs going on at the moment?
No, I haven't.
That's become a thing, right? So now there are these huge run clubs, and when you hear at Barangaroo, you'll just be walking. I sometimes park at the reserve over there.
Yeah.
You'll have this literally kilometre of people run by you with this booming dance music, and one of the reasons for that is people are using run clubs to meet each other.
Yeah.
Right. because you're right. We don't really do church anymore, so that's not a thing.
Mm-hmm.
People don't really do clubs really that so much.
It's so sad, isn't it?
It is, right? It is. It's people don't socialize. There used to be corporates used to do corporate sport and things like that. Incidence of that has fallen completely.
Yes.
A lot of that, I think, part of that has to do with economic dislocation as well. The impact of COVID had a huge impact on the corporate sector.
Yeah.
Generally, lots of changes around here. The Victorian government wants to legislate work from home for 2 days a week. The election campaign recently, work from home was a big deal. If you're at home all the time, pretty hard to meet people.
Yeah.
And one of the arguments I have for that, and I think it applies from a medical perspective as well, which is the older people who've had a good career and have beautiful houses and can, work from their beautiful study and they can meet their client for breakfast or whatever in the beautiful suburb they live in, is great. And then what a lot of those guys are doing, or girls, or women in that case, is sending an email back to the office where all of their staff are, or maybe they're all in their own homes and off they go working away. That's not a collegiate work environment, right? And so the young people of tomorrow are not being trained the way I was trained, or where you have a corporate mentor above you, sort of teaching you how to do things. And I think, I have no evidence for this, but I would say that will have a profound impact on the health of people. Because I don't believe that being socially isolated is necessarily a good way to be.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with you on that.
And what I don't know is how you get out of it.
Well, you start socializing, you start connecting with people, you start going into work when you can, and you think about things that have piqued your interest before and you haven't sort of pursued it, whether it's a sport or whether it's a run club or whether it's a book club, anything where you actually meet new people outside of your current social circles, and you make an effort to be responsible to make that interaction sort of meaningful and fruitful. I think we often rely on other people to make us feel comfortable. We forget that we can actually make other people feel comfortable. And then it's a bit more of a give and take after that.
Yeah, that's an interesting perspective, right? We can contribute to them as much as they contribute to us. I think that is a lost art, I've got to say. I think that is very much lost. And look, I think as well that the nature of work has changed a lot. The whole rise of the gig economy as well. You've got a lot more contracting people than we used to have, who are sort of individuals. And that sort of, again, becomes difficult to sort of live in a collegiate sort of environment.
Absolutely.
Look, you mentioned COVID earlier. I'm fascinated on your perspective on COVID, right? Because I think we've learnt a tremendous amount. So it was obviously a very traumatic period for everyone. I have a perspective on it, which is it was almost like a war. And this, just bear with me, right? It was almost like a war because people were locked down in their houses. We were separated out from each other. We were told to shelter and be safe. And the soldiers became the healthcare sector. The soldiers became the people in hospitals treating the sick, treating the ill from this pandemic while we're trying to understand it, with an extra part of it being the scientific community trying to find a cure. So that's sort of how I've, in my head, looked at COVID. What was your experience of COVID as a healthcare professional?
I don't know how to answer that question.
Well, you were at work, right?
Yeah, I was at work.
Yeah.
Look, I guess I could answer it in terms of my own personal perspective.
Yeah, totally. It's a podcast. It has to be your personal perspective.
Yeah. I think I was grateful. We were talking about working from home. I think people saw us as people as professionals who were putting ourselves at risk. And yes, to some extent we were. But I was actually very grateful for the opportunity to leave my house and go to work.
Yeah.
And then, with a mask or through a computer, interact with people. So for me, I was very grateful to be in my profession for my own personal reasons, to be able to actually leave the house, go to work.
Yeah.
I think I would have really struggled to stay at home.
Because you're a pretty sociable guy, right? Like me, I get energy from being with people.
Yes.
Right. being at home is not my idea of fun.
Yeah.
Well, it's a lovely place, but I need to be out.
Yeah. So I really felt for people who had to just stay at home and work from home all day and then stay at home after work. That would have been horrible.
Yeah.
And I think that's why a lot of people really suffered in terms of anxiety and depression, particularly in places like Victoria, where their laws were...
Oh, it was draconian what happened, right?
So I was grateful that I was able to leave and go to work. And I was grateful that I was able to be helpful to people who were really struggling at that time. And we were trying to figure out what was going on at the same time as everybody else, really. So, we took guidance from, from the public health officials, and I don't think we particularly challenged what was going on. I think we trusted in the health system, and we figured that whoever was in charge of things were really doing it with our best interests at heart. And then, on a ground level, we were trying to look after our patients as best as we could. I think a lot of people struggled during that time. A lot of people died during that time. I think we forget that many people died during COVID.
Yeah, we sort of just washed it away, haven't we?
Yeah.
We don't really want to ever think about it again.
Yeah, absolutely. And there were young, healthy people, not just the elderly. So yeah, it was a traumatizing period of time to go through for everyone, really. And I think sometimes people ask about, what we'll do with the next pandemic. And I think I just don't really want to think about it, because...
That's the worrying thing though, right?
Yeah.
Because I look at it and go, you can go into how it happened and where it came from, and I have my own views on where it came from. I think it was an accident, is my personal view, right? Because it's likely to happen. But I do worry what'll happen again, so we do need to think about it. And I look at things generally from a public policy perspective. The way we behaved as a country worries me a little bit. We locked down Western Sydney, right? We locked down Western Sydney. We didn't lock down the east, just the west.
Yeah.
Helicopters, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Victoria, arrested somebody in their pajamas, a pregnant woman in her pajamas, for posting something on Facebook.
Yeah.
Because we thought that was a rational thing to do, right?
Yeah.
I look at that and go, there's a difference between how we look at things from a healthcare perspective and how we react to them as a society. And I look at some of those actions and just go, are we proud of ourselves for that? I'm not really sure we're proud of ourselves for arresting a pregnant woman in her pajamas for posting something on Facebook. I don't think that's who we are as a country.
Yeah.
I'm not sure we really want CCTV in parks, to stop people from being outside when the transmission of COVID outside was substantially less, right?
Yeah.
So what I think about learning from the pandemic is not just from a healthcare perspective. I think, how do we deal with it? I think we've got a lot to learn there.
Yeah.
But how do we behave as a society? I think we had a lot to learn there.
Yes.
I'm not sure we're really exploring that yet.
You're probably right on that one. Yeah.
And I think part of the reason why we're not exploring it is we don't want to think about it anymore. Yeah. And what's interesting is every leader that served during COVID is gone, right? Everyone.
Right.
Which is an interesting sign.
Yeah.
What we talk a lot about in the show as well is the impact of COVID on the economy has been the size of government grew substantially, and it's never really shrunk. And so we went from a position where government was this size. Government was then in charge of everything. So state premiers then decided they could shut down borders and become sovereign states. The states didn't realize they had that power. All of a sudden, you had a federal government that was almost impotent, to go back to our sexual health thing, right?
Were they impotent, or did they just choose to be impotent?
They had no power. They had no power to stop a state from shutting its borders. What they did have power to do was pay for things. Because the federal government, that's what it does, it pays for things. Other than defense and foreign affairs, that's generally what the federal government does, right? The states control, the hospitals, the roads, the schools. That's their job. They're service providers.
Yep.
That's our system of government.
Yeah.
So in a situation of the pandemic, actually the Premier was far more powerful than the Prime Minister, which was something we hadn't tested before. And I think that's another one, perhaps a longer chat on that one. But just on that, so one of the things we're seeing a lot of is the sort of cost of healthcare rising substantially, right? And in the recent campaign, election campaign, the Prime Minister ran on Medicare being an important part of Australian society, and it is, right?
Yep.
No doubt by that. But it's not the case anymore that the Medicare rebate covers the cost of a consult generally, right? So there is a gap payment, and that's growing. And I don't remember my figures, but I think Medicare and NDIS are sort of almost becoming equal in terms of the cost of funding. Medicare will continue to grow. You add aged care on top of that, and then healthcare is a huge part of our economy. You and I talk about preventative health a lot, right? What can we do to sort of manage the cost of our healthcare system a bit better from a GP perspective? Is there nothing we can do about it, or is it more a case of, as a society, are people doing enough to manage themselves properly?
I think the cost of healthcare is increasing because the population is increasing.
That's true. That's
Right.
absolutely true.
We're living for longer,
Yeah.
and we're more obese than we used to be, right? And that comes with its own set of health issues.
Yeah.
So if you combine those three factors, I think it's pretty natural that our health costs are going to go up. And maybe this is me being a bit biased and simplistic, but you know the saying, if you don't have your health, you have nothing.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
So when I think about the investment into health, I think of it that way. If health is really a priority. If we as Australians are not healthy, then it's going to impact all the other areas of our lives and funding for everything else as well. So if we're not healthy, our ability to study, to work, to not be a burden in other ways on the funding system, it has a profound impact. So I think we should be investing as much as possible into health, is basically what I'm saying.
But is it preventative health though? Because I mean, it feels to me like a lot of the investments we do are post the problem happening. Ozempic, for example, right?
Yep.
That obviously has applications for some people, but it seems to be having a much wider impact, right? You mentioned diabetes, obesity. Like obesity in some cases is a health condition, but in many cases is probably preventable.
Yes.
Right? So I wonder whether, and this is what I'm testing you on, a pathway to reducing healthcare costs is to get in there a lot earlier. Right.
So there's prevention at different levels. So there's prevention when you're completely healthy. So if you are, you've got good health literacy and you know what to look out for and what to test for and how to manage your health in terms of diet and exercise and looking after your mental health before anything becomes a problem. That's the earliest stage of prevention. Perfect time to for all of us to get care. But if you look at diabetes, for example, an early diagnosis of diabetes and having access to healthcare then and regular monitoring and medications then
prevents the diabetes from actually happening.
Correct. So that prevents someone from having a heart attack or a stroke or diabetic retinopathy or kidney disease. So there's prevention even at that stage with a new diagnosis of diabetes. Medications like the ones you just spoke about, like Ozempic, there's even prevention in that stage. So when you're treating someone for obesity, you're treating them for all of the complications, as a preventative for all of the complications that result from obesity.
That could arise as a consequence of obesity.
Correct. Yeah. So if you can have access to healthcare, so general practice, very easily at that point, then that has some really significant long-term benefits. If there's enough funding for emergency departments where someone's presenting and the emergency department's not overrun and they have the actual time and ability to see the patient and diagnose something and put them on the right path early on before they have to come back again or an adverse event happens, then there's advantages to funding just at that basic level of healthcare, which is general practice.
You see general practice though as sort of the first line of defense. Is that how you sort of see it?
I see it as the first port of call.
The first port of call, okay, when a problem arises.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you want to be able to go and access general practice, before the problem arises and at the very early stages of it as well. That can prevent someone having to present to an emergency department.
Yeah. Interesting, isn't it? I always see general practices. I understand that concept of the first port of call as well. Because I think when you see your doctor as well, your doctor often says, look, you're not doing this or this or this, right? You need to stop eating that stuff,
Yeah.
right? Which is not something you ever say to me, obviously, right? We'll have to.
Mainly because I'm guilty of doing some stuff.
That's right.
Yes.
Well, we like similar food. It's been great having you on, and it's so good to spend some time together. But before we end, I wanted to say to you, if you had 3 things that you'd like to see in your field, whether it's a patient thing or something you want to see in the country or whatever it is, what would they be?
In my field?
Or anywhere. You're outside of being a doctor. It could be anything you want.
Yeah. I would like to see people taking the time to connect to other people more, whether it's on a professional level or a personal level, and to be genuinely interested in each other. I think that has massive health benefits and mental health benefits, personal benefits. So I would really like to see more of that, and I'd like to see us really prioritize that. I think that is the value of that is underestimated.
I agree totally.
And I would like people to really focus on their health, as in to focus on making their health a priority above everything else, particularly work. So, right?
Yeah.
We often put our health on the, we leave it on the bench basically, and just manage everything else as a priority first.
Yep.
And I think if we could start to prioritize that, we would all be in a much better place. I think those are the 2 things I would say I'd like to see.
Well, good. I agree with both of those things, and I'm not guilty of either of them. Dr. Shiva Rayar, thank you so much for being part of the podcast.
Thank you very much for having me. I really enjoyed it.